Hi, we're in the Fess Parker barrel room today, and we're going to taste some of our red wines. My name's Tim Snider. I'm here with head winemaker Blair Fox, and we're going to taste a few Pinot Noirs as well as a Syrah and a red Rhone blend. We're going to start today with our Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir. It's a fantastic wine sourced with some great vineyards out in the Appalachian. I'm going to have Blair tell us a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Tim. Like Tim said, all sourced from Santa Rita Hills, mainly from our Parker West vineyard, which is on the far western extreme side of the Appalachian. Super cool climate out there, very, very windswept, lots of marine influence. This is actually a south-facing vineyard that has a great exposure, but like I said, very cool. A couple different vineyard sources. So we have our Parker West, our Rio Vista, a little bit of Ashley's goes into this. It's just a really traditional Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir. I think on the palate, you know, you'll find some red cherry, Bing cherry. There's a little bit of sandalwood on here. I think you get some nice baking spices from the French oak. Just a fresh, bright example of Santa Rita Pinot Noir.
One of the things that I've always liked about Santa Rita Hills Pinot, and I think this wine shows it in spades, is that it really strikes a great balance of having some structure, some color, a little bit of tannin, yet retains its elegance, retains finesse, still has really a lot of acidity to this wine. And you've kind of talked to me a little bit about Santa Rita Pinot Noir and the size of the yields and the size of the grapes themselves and the clusters and how that contributes. Maybe would you mind sharing a little bit of that with us?
Sure. We get very, very small yields out in Santa Rita Hills. Tiny little berries, really concentrated flavors, tiny clusters, a very high skin to juice ratio. So it yields wines that look like this. You know, we have a lot of color in this wine. I'm not doing anything in the winery to try to extract more color. It's actually very traditional methods. We're hand picking at night when the grapes are very cool. We're hand sorting in the winery. I'm doing whole cluster fermentation with this too, so that's where we're not actually pulling the berry from the stem. And then we're going into open top fermentation, and after fermentation we're basket pressing. So old world technique, and yielding, I think, you know, some pretty special wines.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if we move to the second wine, I think what we start to see here is all of those inputs, but also really a specific vineyard, in this case our Ashley's vineyard, shining through, and you really get a sense of place with this wine, as we do with quite a few of our single vineyards that we work with, which is significant. This one to me always has a really nice minerality, and you know, on the nose it's showing a little bit more of that whole cluster note, I think, also. But you know, it's definitely been a favorite in our lineup, kind of a flagship for us. And would you mind sharing a little bit about the Ashley's vineyard?
You know, this vineyard is a very unique vineyard. It starts off basically beach sand at the bottom, and then it climbs at about 1,000 feet up into like heavy clay, black clay soils. We also have 5 different clones of Pinot Noir planted out there. So we have 115, 114, 777, 667, and Pomard. And those all come into this blend, and I think really work together to make this a really spectacular wine. We're also using about 25% whole cluster in this wine. I think that's giving it some savoriness. I think it gives it an ageability and really helps with tannin integration as well. And then this is aged for about 16 to 18 months in French oak, of which usually 40% is new.
Mm-hmm. Really pretty. This is a pretty vintage. Great aromatics as well. Well, let's turn our attention to the Rhone varieties. Syrah was Fess's favorite wine in the lineup. It's the first varietal that we really planted here on the red side of the equation and kind of put us on the map here at Fess Parker Winery. These 2017s are absolutely gorgeous. Blair's license plate says Syrah, and so I think he is a aficionado as well. So I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about Syrah.
I've always been a huge Syrah fan. I worked in Australia, traveled all throughout the Rhone Valley of France, and I think Santa Barbara County is a fantastic area to grow Syrah. Syrah really performs well here. The majority of this wine is actually from Rodney's Vineyard, which is our state vineyard right here at about 1,200 foot elevation, planted in the early 90s. So old vines, yielding, small yields, very, very concentrated color and flavor. I treat this wine very similar to Pinot Noir in the cellar. I beat it up a little bit. I'm a little more rough with it, but not quite as delicate as a Pinot Noir. But Syrah in this area really yields intense aromatics, great tannin, great structure. I think as well, with basket pressing and being gentle in that side of it really yields these bright flavors. I think you'll find some plum, some blackberry, some boysenberry, these dark fruit flavors. But also we get pepper, we get a little bit of lifted aromatics, like lifted, violet types of floral aromatics, along with just great structure and depth of flavor.
One of the things that I've always loved about our Syrah program, this wine, Rodney's, and to me, they've always straddled that new world, old world. You have that red fruit, you have that dark fruit, that plum that you were talking about. But there definitely is an earthy component to this wine as well.
Yeah, I think this vineyard especially yields that kind of tobacco earth. And it's just a very great savory element to this wine. Probably
the best unsung wine in our portfolio as well, for my money, is the Santa Barbara Syrah. And what we'll do to finish here is we're going to move on to the most popular wine in our tasting room, the Big Easy. This is a wine that we originally made as a single vineyard Syrah back in the early 2000s, coming from Camp 4 Vineyard. We gave it a proprietary name that was developed by my wife Ashley when we were first tasting it, because of the style of wine, actually. Big and round and ripe, but with pretty tame tannins for the size of the wine. And then later, when we decided to make this into a Rhone blend, a proprietary blend, back in 2007, the 2007 vintage, we decided to marry it up with the connotations associated with New Orleans, and thus have the original artwork from a New Orleans-based artist on this package. So a tasting room favorite, one of our most popular wines, and we'll ask you to talk a little bit about the varietal composition and sort of the winemaking that goes into this.
Sure. So this is a Syrah-dominated blend. Next up would be Petite Syrah. That is all grown here on the estate as well. And then there's some Grenache, kind of give it some red berry character. So you have Syrah, which again has the dark fruit. And then you have this Petite Syrah, which is this really dark, inky grape variety, which adds structure and tannin and depth. And then you have Grenache, which will lift it with like a cherry and red fruit profile. So I think it makes for a really nice blend. Like Tim was saying, this is kind of this big, rich, lush, kind of easy to drink wine, but it also still has great acidity, you know, and it has great drive and verve, and it's one that you can also cellar, frankly. I mean, it's ready to drink now with some nice, great barbecue or steak or some game, but it's also able to cellar for many years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed this quick tasting cross-section of our red wines here at Fess Parker Winery. I think Blair and his team are obviously putting some things that we're really proud of in the bottle, and we hope to enjoy a glass with you soon.
Cheers.